One mix-up, one skirt, no escape. The blast of cold air in the hotel lobby immediately told Connor this week was going to be complicated. After trudging through the sweltering city streets, he stepped through the revolving glass doors carrying a worn duffel bag over one shoulder. The fabric was frayed at the seams, and his faded polo shirt still carried the marks of an earlier coffee spill. Exhaustion showed on his face. Behind the reception desk, Patricia glanced up from her computer and instantly noticed him. He didn't look like the usual business travelers who frequented the upscale hotel. Still, something about him caught her attention. The moment Connor approached the counter, Patricia greeted him with a bright smile. "Ms. Walsh, welcome. We've been expecting you." Before he could respond, she reached beneath the desk and lifted out an elegant burgundy garment bag embroidered with a luxury designer logo. "Your materials arrived this morning from Pinnacle Corporation," she explained. "Housekeeping pressed everything for you, and your executive package includes complimentary services throughout your stay." Connor stared at the garment bag in confusion. "I think there's been some kind of mistake." Patricia barely paused. "Julia Walsh? Here for the Management Leadership Conference. My name is Connor." "Of course. Your suite is ready." She slid a key card across the marble countertop. "Suite 2412. Conference registration begins tomorrow morning at 8. All the details are in your welcome package." A leather portfolio appeared beside the garment bag. Before Connor could correct her again, Patricia had already turned to assist another guest. Standing there awkwardly, he picked up both items and headed toward the elevators. Inside the mirrored elevator, he studied his reflection. Scruffy beard, rumpled clothes, travel-worn expression. Not exactly the image of a polished corporate trainer. When the elevator doors opened on the 24th floor, he followed the plush hallway to Suite 2412. The key card flashed green. The room beyond was larger than his entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering skyline. A king-sized bed sat in the center of the room, perfectly arranged beneath soft lighting. Everything smelled expensive. Connor tossed his duffel onto the luggage stand before curiosity got the better of him. He unzipped the garment bag. Inside hung a carefully organized professional wardrobe. A burgundy dress occupied the center. Beside it were silk blouses in soft cream and blush pink, tailored black trousers, a charcoal skirt, and a navy blazer. A matching pair of pumps rested neatly in a separate shoe pouch. Attached to the dress was a handwritten note. "Julia, you're going to be amazing this week. Can't wait to hear how it goes. Marcus." Connor slowly lowered the note. Opening the portfolio, he found a detailed conference schedule. The cover page read, "Advanced Management Strategies for Modern Organizations Lead Facilitator, Julia Walsh." The remaining pages contained presentations, workshop exercises, case studies, and leadership training materials. At that moment, his phone vibrated. His banking app displayed a balance of $247.83. Connor sighed. The conference he had traveled to attend had drained nearly everything he had earned from his latest freelance project. His flight home wasn't until Friday, and somehow he had ended up in a luxury suite that someone else had already paid for. He flipped through the training materials again. Most of it seemed familiar. Team management, conflict resolution, productivity systems, performance reviews. Nothing particularly difficult. In fact, with his years of project management experience, he was fairly certain he could teach half of it himself. A dangerous thought began to form in the back of his mind. The burgundy dress seemed impossible to ignore. Every time Connor looked away, his eyes drifted back toward it hanging in the closet. Years ago, during college, he had performed in an experimental production of As You Like It. The entire cast had been male, and he had played Rosalind. Back then, the costume department had transformed him so completely that even his roommate had walked past him without recognition. But that had been theater. This was real life. And somehow, that made it far more intimidating. Connor picked up one of the matching pumps and examined it. Size 9. Exactly his size. He glanced toward the bathroom mirror, where his exhausted reflection stared back at him. The shower ran hot, filling the luxurious marble bathroom with clouds of steam. After carefully shaving, He used the complimentary toiletries provided by the hotel and emerged feeling cleaner than he had in weeks. Wrapped in a thick white robe, he sat on the edge of the king-sized bed. Logically, he knew what he should do. Call the front desk, explain the mix-up, find a budget motel, and attend the conference as himself. Instead, he opened the portfolio again. Everything had already been arranged. The suite was paid for. The conference materials were prepared. 25 managers were expecting a trainer named Julia Walsh. As he reviewed the documents, curiosity got the better of him. Who exactly was Julia Walsh? Opening his laptop, he searched for her name. Nothing. No professional website. No social media presence. No speaking engagements. No articles. It was as if she barely existed online. Connor closed the laptop and looked toward the closet. The dress remained waiting. Just to see, he said quietly. He slipped it over his head. The fabric settled smoothly against his body. The tailored design fit surprisingly well, hugging his frame without feeling restrictive. Years of running had kept him lean, and the dress fell neatly above his knees. The shoes proved more challenging. Though he hadn't worn heels since college, the 3-inch pumps were practical enough. He carefully crossed the suite several times.
Heel, toe.
Smaller steps. Straight posture. Relaxed shoulders. Slowly, old habits returned. Standing near the window, Connor caught his reflection in the glass. At a distance, the image staring back looked remarkably convincing. Professional.
Polished.
Believable. His phone suddenly rang. Startled, he nearly lost his balance reaching for it. Hello, Ms. Walsh. The caller sounded efficient and businesslike. This is Rebecca from Pinnacle Corporation. I wanted to confirm that your materials arrived safely and that your accommodations meet expectations. Connor froze. His naturally soft voice had often caused confusion over the phone before. Carefully controlling his tone, he replied, "Everything is excellent, thank you." Wonderful. The management team is excited for tomorrow's session. Registration begins at 8 o'clock sharp in the Meridian Conference Room. Will you require any additional equipment? Connor quickly checked the schedule. No, everything appears to be arranged. Perfect. Breakfast service begins at 7:30. Have a pleasant evening, Ms. Walsh. The call ended. Connor stared at the screen. His pulse raced. The situation had somehow become much more real. Yet no one had questioned him. No one had requested identification. The hotel accepted him. The company accepted him. Everyone seemed completely convinced. Later that evening, he ordered room service. A grilled salmon entree, a fresh salad, a glass of white wine. When the waiter arrived, Connor braced himself for questions. None came. The man simply set up the meal, collected a signature, and left. Alone again, Connor continued studying the presentation materials while he ate. Communication strategies, workplace conflict, leadership development. Most of it felt familiar. He had spent years managing programming teams and translating technical concepts into language clients could understand. By the time the clock passed 10, he had memorized the first session and rehearsed his opening remarks several times. Carefully, he hung the dress back inside the closet. Then he collapsed into bed and set 3 separate alarms. Morning arrived far too quickly. Still half asleep, Connor made a decision he hadn't fully considered the night before. He shaved his legs. Once finished, there was no turning back. The small cosmetics pouch included foundation, mascara, lipstick, and several neutral shades. Drawing on techniques remembered from his theater days, he applied everything lightly and conservatively. Nothing dramatic. Just enough. The burgundy dress fit even better the second time. After twisting his brown hair into a neat low bun, he secured it with pins from the hotel bathroom. The pump still demanded concentration, but he managed the journey to the elevator without incident. Good morning, Ms. Walsh. Patricia greeted him warmly from the front desk. The Meridian Conference Room is down the hallway past the restaurant. Connor offered a polite nod. Coffee first, confidence later. The conference room was already busy when he arrived. 25 participants sat around a large U-shaped arrangement of tables. Laptops glowed. Coffee cups steamed. Quiet conversations filled the room. Before Connor could gather himself, a man in a tailored gray suit approached enthusiastically. Julia. He extended his hand. Marcus Chun, Vice President of Human Resources. Thank you for stepping in on such short notice.
Connor shook his hand.
It's a pleasure to be here. Marcus turned toward the group. Everyone, I'd like to introduce Julia Walsh. Her approach to leadership development has received outstanding recommendations. 25 pairs of eyes shifted toward him. Expectant. Curious. Waiting. Connor walked to the front of the room and connected the presentation laptop. As the title slide appeared on the screen, an unexpected calm settled over him. This part, at least, he knew. He looked around the room and smiled. Good morning, everyone. The room grew silent. Before we begin discussing communication styles, I'd like to hear about the biggest leadership challenges you're currently facing. Immediately, hands began to rise. The response was immediate. Nearly every hand in the room shot into the air. Connor pointed toward a woman seated near the center of the table. She wore a navy blazer and looked relieved to be called on. Managing remote employees, she said. Half my department works from home now, and keeping everyone connected feels impossible. Connor nodded thoughtfully. How many others are facing similar challenges? Around the room, hands rose again. Almost all of them. A familiar confidence settled over him. This was territory he understood. Leaving the podium behind, he moved naturally around the room, asking follow-up questions, encouraging discussion, and drawing quieter participants into the conversation. The charcoal carpet muffled the sound of his heels as he paced between tables. Soon ideas filled the whiteboard. Communication gaps. Team isolation. Accountability concerns. As themes emerged, Connor connected them into larger patterns, guiding the discussion with the ease of someone who had spent years leading teams. Before he realized it, the morning session was nearly over. Let's take 15 minutes, he announced, glancing at the silver watch on his wrist, a treasured heirloom from his grandmother. When we return, we'll work through some difficult workplace conversations. The room emptied quickly as managers headed for fresh coffee and hallway conversations. Connor reached for a bottle of water. 3 straight hours of speaking had left his throat dry. A familiar voice appeared beside him. Fantastic start. Marcus Chin smiled broadly. They're an engaged group. They make it easy, Connor replied. Marcus laughed. I attended one of your workshops in Chicago last year. This version feels even stronger. Connor nearly inhaled his water. Chicago? For a moment, panic flashed through him. Fortunately, years of improvisation saved him. Every audience is different, he said smoothly. I've adjusted a few things since then. It shows. Marcus seemed completely satisfied. By the way, the executive team wants to take you to dinner tomorrow night. Nothing formal. Just a chance to discuss leadership development initiatives. Connor forced a calm smile. I'd be happy to. The afternoon focused on conflict management. Participants paired off and worked through scenarios from the workbook. Connor moved among the groups, offering guidance and asking questions rather than giving answers. The click of his heels had become almost unnoticeable now. At one table, 2 managers were deeply invested in a mock budget dispute. If I lose those positions, one argued, frustration clear in his voice, my project falls apart. Connor leaned lightly against the edge of their table. What if the conversation isn't about defending your position? Both men paused. What do you mean? What if you spend less energy arguing for resources and more energy understanding why the other person needs them? The younger manager frowned thoughtfully. The exercise immediately shifted direction. Moments like that repeated throughout the afternoon. Arguments became conversations. Conversations became solutions. By 5 o'clock, everyone looked mentally exhausted. Connor wrapped up the session with a review of the day's key lessons and assigned a simple observation exercise for the evening. Marcus approached again as participants packed up. Excellent work today. He shook Connor's hand enthusiastically. Same time tomorrow. Finally alone, Connor rode the elevator back to the 24th floor. The moment he entered the suite, the shoes came off. His feet practically sighed with relief. Dropping onto the sofa, he checked his phone. Several missed calls from his roommate. He would deal with those later. Right now, he needed food. And perhaps someone willing to invent a machine that massaged sore feet. Room service arrived shortly afterward. Pasta carbonara. Fresh bread. A bottle of red wine carrying a price tag that probably exceeded his weekly grocery budget. Connor enjoyed every bite. Beyond the towering windows, city lights flickered to life as darkness settled over the skyline. He still couldn't quite believe it. An entire day. 8 full hours. 25 managers. Not one person had questioned him. No suspicious looks. No awkward moments. Nothing except professional respect. Opening tomorrow's materials, Connor reviewed the next session. Delegation. Accountability. Performance coaching. Meanwhile, the remainder of Julia's wardrobe waited neatly in the closet. Tomorrow's outfit had already been selected. A charcoal pencil skirt paired with a cream silk blouse. Attached to the hanger was another small handwritten note. The details barely mattered anymore. Whether through bad luck, coincidence, or administrative chaos, he had stepped into someone else's role. Yet something unexpected had happened. Standing in front of that room, helping people solve problems and become better leaders, Connor had felt more capable than he had in years. The clothes weren't the important part. Neither was the name. What mattered was the work. And for the first time in a long while, the work felt meaningful. Tuesday arrived beneath gray skies and steady rain. After dressing, Connor studied himself briefly in the mirror. The charcoal skirt and cream blouse looked sharp and professional. His hair cooperated immediately, forming a tidy bun without the usual struggle. By the time he entered the elevator, he almost looked as though he belonged there. "Looking sharp this morning, Ms. Walsh." The elderly elevator operator offered a friendly smile. Connor thanked him and continued downstairs. The Meridian conference room was already buzzing. Managers chatted over coffee while comparing notes from the previous evening's assignment. The moment he entered, several people waved. Julia. Perfect timing. A silver-haired participant motioned him over. The group quickly pulled him into an ongoing discussion. One manager named Tom was describing difficulties with a team member who consistently missed deadlines while reacting poorly to criticism. Connor listened carefully. When Tom finished, Connor asked a simple question. "What is your instinct telling you?" Tom considered it. "I think he's overwhelmed." "Why?" "He never asks for help." Connor nodded. "So, what happens if you approach him with curiosity instead of correction?" The table fell silent. Several participants exchanged thoughtful looks. And just like that, another conversation began. The morning disappeared in a blur of coaching exercises, leadership discussions, and breakthrough moments as Connor continued guiding the group through another successful day. Connor found himself drawing on years of managing remote developers, translating those experiences into universal principles. The participants took notes furiously, asking follow-up questions that pushed him to think deeper. Lunch was catered in an adjacent room. Connor picked at a Caesar salad, conscious of not spilling on the cream blouse. "Mind if I join you?" Rebecca, the woman who'd called Sunday night, appeared with her own plate. "Please," Connor gestured to an empty chair. "I've been sitting in when I can." "Your session on delegation really resonated." Rebecca cut into her chicken. "I've been hoarding tasks because training someone seems like more work than doing it myself." Common trap. Connor sipped his iced tea. "What's one task you could hand off this week as an experiment?" They discussed strategies until the afternoon session. Connor led the group through accountability frameworks using their real challenges as case studies. By the time 5 o'clock arrived, several participants lingered, reluctant to leave. "See you at dinner tomorrow," Marcus reminded him. Brio Bistro, 7 o'clock. Back in the suite, Connor ordered a steak and baked potato. He ate while reviewing Wednesday's materials on performance management. His feet had adjusted to the heels somewhat, though he still gladly kicked them off at every opportunity. The week developed its own rhythm. Each morning, Connor selected from Julia's wardrobe. Wednesday brought the pale pink blouse with black pants. Thursday, the navy blazer over a white shell. He refined his makeup routine, keeping it professional but polished. The bun became second nature. The participants opened up more each day, sharing real frustrations and victories. Connor guided them through difficult conversations, helped them see patterns in their leadership styles, celebrated breakthroughs when someone grasped a concept that had eluded them. Wednesday's dinner proved less daunting than anticipated. The executive team peppered him with questions about curriculum development and measuring training effectiveness. Connor drew on articles he'd read, conferences he'd attended as Connor, reframing the insights through Julia's perspective. "We need someone like you full-time." Marcus spoke over dessert, a decadent chocolate mousse. "Our internal training programs are outdated." "Flattering," Connor demurred. "But I'm sure you have capable people internally." "None with your experience." The CEO, an older woman named Diane, leaned forward. "What would it take to bring you on board?" Connor nearly dropped his spoon. "I'd need to think about it." "Of course, but know that we're serious. The impact you've had on this cohort in just 3 days is remarkable." Thursday morning, Connor chose the burgundy dress again. It had become a kind of armor, the first piece that transformed him into Julia. The participants greeted him warmly, several mentioning how they'd applied concepts from earlier in the week. "My team meeting yesterday went completely differently." Tom practically bounced in his seat. "Asked questions instead of issuing directives. We actually solved a problem that's been festering for months." The success stories multiplied. Connor felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the conference room's temperature. These people were changing how they led because of conversations they'd had together. "Tomorrow's our last day." Connor addressed the group as Thursday wound down. "I want to focus on sustaining these changes when you're back in your regular environments. Will you stay in touch?" Rebecca asked. "Maybe a monthly check-in call." Others nodded enthusiastically. Connor found himself agreeing even as he wondered how to manage it. Friday arrived too quickly. Connor selected the charcoal skirt again, paired with the navy blazer. He'd grown comfortable moving in the professional women's attire, no longer conscious of every step or gesture. The final session focused on action planning. Each participant crafted specific commitments, sharing them with accountability partners. Connor facilitated a closing circle where everyone named one insight they'd carry forward. "This week changed how I see my role." A quiet manager named David spoke carefully. "I thought leadership meant having all the answers. Julia showed me it means asking better questions." When the last participant left, Connor stood alone in the Meridian room. Flip charts covered the walls filled with frameworks and breakthrough moments captured in colorful markers. 5 days. 5 intense days of learning, leadership, and unexpected transformation. Connor stood alone in the conference room, studying the walls covered in flip charts and handwritten notes. Every page represented a breakthrough, a difficult conversation, or a new perspective someone had discovered during the week. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Marcus appeared in the doorway. "There you are." Connor smiled. "Looking for me?" "Diane would like to see you before you leave." A few minutes later, Connor found himself seated in the CEO's executive suite on the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. Diane sat across from him, calm and direct. Without wasting time, she slid a folder across the coffee table. "I'm going to be straightforward." Connor opened the folder. His eyes immediately widened. Inside was a formal employment offer. Director of Leadership Development. The position included responsibility for designing management programs, developing leadership curriculum, mentoring facilitators, and shaping the company's long-term learning strategy. Then he saw the salary. For a moment he wondered if there had been another mistake. The number was nearly 3 times what he had earned during his best year in technology consulting. Diane watched his reaction. "The role requires relocation, of course." Connor nodded silently. "We'll cover moving expenses, provide a signing bonus, and support the transition however necessary." "This is incredibly generous."
"No."
Diane smiled. "It's an investment." She leaned forward slightly. The response from this week's participants has been remarkable. People aren't simply satisfied. They're energized. Connor glanced down at the offer again. "You have a rare ability to help people grow," Diane continued. "That's difficult to teach. When would you need an answer?" "Take the weekend." Then she smiled. "But I hope you'll say yes." Back in the suite, Connor sat quietly on the edge of the bed. The week suddenly felt surreal. The navy blazer hung neatly in the closet. The charcoal skirt rested across a chair. The hotel robe felt oddly comforting after 5 days of presentations and conversations. His phone vibrated. A message from his roommate. "How's the conference? Haven't heard from you all week." Connor stared at the screen. How could he possibly explain any of this? How could he summarize a week that had begun with a misunderstanding and ended with a life-changing opportunity? Eventually, he set the phone aside. Some stories required more than a text message. That evening, he ordered one final room service dinner: filet mignon, Caesar salad, a glass of wine. While eating, he reread the offer letter. The title caught his attention again: Director of Leadership Development. And beneath it, Julia Walsh. The name no longer felt temporary. At first it had been a mistake. Then it became a role. Now it felt like something more. Julia wasn't simply a name. She was confidence, competence, purpose. Julia walked into executive meetings without hesitation. Julia helped managers solve problems. Julia inspired teams to communicate better. Julia belonged in those rooms. And somehow, Connor had discovered that he belonged there too. Opening his laptop, he began drafting a response. The words came surprisingly easily. He accepted the position. He outlined ideas for expanding the leadership curriculum, suggested mentorship programs, shared concepts for measuring long-term impact. By the time he finished, he wasn't merely accepting a job. He was envisioning a future. Saturday morning arrived. Packing took longer than expected. Each item of clothing felt connected to a specific memory from the week. The pink blouse, the navy blazer, the charcoal skirt. Finally, he folded the burgundy dress and placed it carefully into the suitcase. The first piece, the one that had changed everything. Downstairs, Patricia greeted him with her usual smile. "I hope you enjoyed your stay, Ms. Walsh." Connor smiled back. "Very much." He signed the checkout paperwork. The signature came naturally now. A company car waited outside. "The driver can take you directly to the airport."
Connor shook his head.
"Actually, I'd like to stop by Pinnacle headquarters first." Earlier that morning, he had called Diane, accepted the position, and asked for a tour of the office before flying home. She had been delighted. The black sedan carried him through downtown streets toward a gleaming glass tower that dominated the skyline. Today he wore black slacks and a cream blouse. Professional, comfortable, familiar. At security, a temporary badge was waiting. Julia Walsh, visitor. Soon-to-be employee. Diane met him in the lobby. "Ready to see your future workplace?" The next several hours passed in a whirlwind. Training facilities, meeting rooms, introductions to department leaders, strategic planning sessions, brainstorming ideas for future programs. Connor spoke with growing confidence. The conversations felt natural, exciting, like pieces of a puzzle finally falling into place. Over lunch, Diane asked the obvious question. "When can you start?" 2 weeks. "Perfect." She extended her hand. "We'll begin the relocation process immediately." The flight home felt strangely unreal. At the airport, Connor bought a magazine focused on professional fashion and workplace presentation. If he was going to build this new chapter properly, he intended to do it well. Back at his apartment, his roommate barely glanced away from the television. "Good conference?" Connor paused. A small smile crossed his face. "It changed my life." "Nice." His roommate shrugged. "Rent's due Tuesday."
Connor laughed.
Some things never changed. Inside his bedroom, he unpacked slowly. The clothing from the week looked unusual hanging beside his old collection of faded shirts and worn jeans. But not for long. Over the next few days, those old clothes would gradually disappear. A new wardrobe would take shape. Not because he was pretending to be someone else, but because he had finally discovered who he wanted to become. And for the first time in years, the future felt completely open. Every new outfit represented more than clothing. It symbolized a fresh chapter. Over the following weeks, Connor immersed himself in learning the skills that would help him succeed in his new role. Makeup tutorials played endlessly on his laptop. Hairstyling videos became part of his evening routine. What initially felt unfamiliar gradually became second nature. Soon, creating a polished professional appearance took less than 20 minutes. The transition into his new career happened just as quickly. On Monday morning, Connor contacted each of his freelance clients to explain that he had accepted a full-time corporate position. Most congratulated him immediately. Director of Leadership Development? One longtime client said with obvious surprise. That's quite a leap from software consulting. Connor laughed. Apparently, I discovered a talent I didn't know I had. 2 weeks later, he stood inside an almost empty apartment. Everything he owned fit neatly into 3 suitcases. His roommate had already found someone to take over the lease. As they said goodbye, the roommate paused. You seem different lately. Connor looked up. Different how? More confident. Connor smiled.
Yeah.
I think that's true. The 6-hour drive to his new city gave him plenty of time to think. A new apartment waited near Pinnacle Corporation's headquarters. A new career. A new beginning. For the first time in years, the future felt exciting rather than uncertain. On Sunday evening, he carefully arranged his professional wardrobe inside the apartment closet. The burgundy dress that had started everything occupied a special place near the center. Not because of the clothing itself, because of what it represented. A chance taken. A risk accepted. A life changed. Monday morning arrived bright and clear. Connor entered Pinnacle's headquarters 30 minutes early. His employee badge hung neatly from a lanyard around his neck. The smiling photo captured someone who looked noticeably different from the exhausted freelancer who had checked into the hotel weeks earlier. More composed. More confident. More certain. Marcus greeted him in the lobby. Ready to build something remarkable? Connor smiled. Absolutely. The first few months passed in a whirlwind. Training programs. Planning meetings. Leadership workshops. Strategic discussions. His calendar filled faster than expected. By lunchtime on his first day, he had already sketched a 6-month roadmap for expanding the company's leadership development initiatives. The work energized him. Months turned into a year. The programs grew. Managers across the company began reporting measurable improvements in communication, employee engagement, and team performance. Connor designed leadership academies, mentoring programs, and coaching networks that continued delivering results long after formal training sessions ended. His reputation spread beyond Pinnacle. Soon he was speaking at conferences and contributing articles to industry publications. The work that had once seemed accidental was becoming a genuine calling. His apartment slowly filled with reminders of that success. Conference badges, professional awards, framed certificates, photos from company events and industry gatherings, business cards bearing his title. Each represented another milestone on a journey he never expected to take. Through it all, the burgundy dress remained hanging in the closet. Occasionally, he would see it while getting ready for work and remember that first chaotic week. The confusion, the uncertainty, the impossible situation that somehow revealed a path forward. Years passed. The leadership programs expanded nationally. New offices adopted the curriculum. Teams of facilitators were hired and trained. What began as a single workshop evolved into a company-wide culture of growth and development. On the 2nd anniversary of his arrival, Diane invited him to lunch. After discussing performance results and future plans, she smiled. We'd like to promote you to vice president. Connor sat quietly for a moment. The title felt surreal. Not because he doubted he had earned it, because he remembered exactly where the journey had begun. A tired consultant, a mistaken assumption, a borrowed opportunity, and the decision to step forward rather than walk away. He accepted the promotion, not as someone pretending to be another person, but as someone who had finally discovered where his strengths truly belonged. His days became filled with meaningful work, helping leaders grow, building programs that changed careers, creating opportunities for others to discover abilities they never knew they possessed. The greatest lesson he learned wasn't about management, communication, or organizational development. It was that sometimes unexpected opportunities reveal parts of ourselves we haven't yet discovered. The person who left Pinnacle's training conference was very different from the one who had arrived. More confident, more capable, more fulfilled, not because he became someone else, because he finally became the best version of himself. And that made all the difference. Thank you for reading.